America, what we're witnessing isn't just a presidency, it's a restoration. 100 days since President Trump returned to the White House, and the transformation is nothing short of miraculous. While the mainstream media hyperventilates over tweets and personalities, they're deliberately ignoring the systematic dismantling of the administrative state that's been suffocating American freedom for decades. And today we're going to take you inside the West Wing, where Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller delivered a masterclass in transparency detailing how Trump has slashed $200 billion in government waste, secured our borders, ended the war on American energy, and restored free speech. The establishment wanted to erase the Trump presidency from history, but instead he's returned with even greater resolve to reclaim America's greatness. You need to understand what's happening because they don't want you to know the full story, so keep watching. Now here's the hard truth. Every 6 years, your dollar loses half its buying power. That means $100,000 savings account today could feel like $50,000 by 2031. And you see it every time you fill up your tank, you buy groceries or pay the bills, prices are up, your dollar is down. But there's a simple way to protect the value of your savings with something real, something proven, gold, an asset that holds its value over time. That's why I trust Noble Gold Investments. They make it simple to protect your savings with physical gold or silver. No high pressure sales, no call centers, just honest guidance, one-on-one support, and transparent pricing. And right now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will send you a free 10-ounce silver American flag bar as a thank you. So head to nextnewsgold.com. It's linked down below, or you can call that number, 877-646-5347. And when Colin picks up the phone, you tell him that Gary Franchi sent you, all right? Tell him I said hi. Now, before we get into my special report from the White House, a couple news items I wanted to bring to your attention. I'm not sure if you saw this, but it looks like Ilhan Omar has got a filthy mouth. Yeah. So if you got some small kids in the room and you don't want to hear any F-bombs, then maybe you should either do the whole earmuff thing or just have them leave. She was confronted by a Daily Caller reporter in the swamp today. Well, you're going to see what she said. Listen.
Be traveling to El Salvador. Congresswoman Omar, I'm Miles Morrell with the Daily Caller News Foundation. Do you think more of your Democratic colleagues should be traveling to El Salvador to advocate on behalf of Rodrigo Garcia?
I think you should fuck off. Yeah, that's
I'm sorry, what, Congresswoman?
fuck off.
Who should?
You.
Why me?
We're not taking any questions right now, but here you go.
Yeah, thanks. Congresswoman Omar, I'm Miles Morrell with the Daily Caller News Foundation. Do you think more of your Democratic colleagues should be traveling to El Salvador to advocate on behalf of Rodrigo Garcia?
I think you should fuck off. Yeah, that's
I'm sorry, what, Congresswoman?
fuck off.
Who should?
You.
Why me?
We're not taking any questions right now, but here you go.
Yeah, Ilhan Omar is a disgrace to Congress. And is that how she responds to press? Telling them to F off? I mean, he asked a very respectable question because, I mean, they are going down to El Salvador. They are advocating for this, person who is in a terrorist organization. But of course, I mean, Ilhan Omar is part of the problem too. So I guess it all makes sense. Anyway, we've also got this from Doge. Elon Musk and the Doge boys expose reckless spending at U.S. education gov. Caesar's Palace and stadiums were being rented out for parties on your dime. Did you know this? Yeah, here's Jesse Waters, a short clip, but this is taking you inside Doge.
Before us. So we normally go around the table, say, what do we get done this week?
Want to go this way?
Sure. No, we start with you.
Sure. So actually, a lot of great work at the Treasury this week. One of the crazy things with regards to the Treasury is that when a payment is made, and the computers at the Treasury actually pay about $5 trillion per year, like crazy amounts, there was formerly not a budget code on there. So if a payment was made, you didn't know actually what it was for. It could have been for anything.
Yeah.
There was a $4 billion COVID fund in the Department of Education. And there was no receipts required, so people could just draw down on it. And when people looked into it, this wasn't us, this was before us, they found that money was being used to rent out Caesar's Palace for parties, rent out stadiums, et cetera. And so the one change that Doge made with the Department of Education is we had the simple requirement that if you draw down money, you must first upload a receipt. That was the only change that was made. You must upload your receipt. And upon doing so,
Yes.
nobody drew down any money anymore.
Yes, but we didn't say that we'd check the receipt. You could send a fake receipt. You could send a picture of your dog. Anything. Anything. But as soon as we asked for anything at all, suddenly the requests were like, oh, we don't need it anymore. Huh, that's interesting.
They were renting Caesar's Palace.
Yes, they were like basically partying on the taxpayer money.
Stadiums.
Yes.
Leasing stadiums.
Leasing stadiums.
For what?
For parties, basically.
For parties.
Yes.
That's a big party.
It's a big party.
You'd think if you were stealing, you'd start small.
They do start small. But then what happens is over the years, so generally the fraud starts out small and they try to hide it. But then year after year, if nobody stops the fraud, it gets more and more brazen. And every year it gets bigger until they're literally renting out stadiums. What's
that, $1 million to rent out a stadium?
Fraud in flagrante delicto, okay? We're talking at scale. We normally go around the table.
Oh, wow. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Did you know that? Did you know it was that bad? Thank God for Elon Musk and thank God for Doge. But now it's time to go to the White House where I filed this report earlier today. Take a look. Good afternoon, Patriots. Gary Franchi here with the Next News Network reporting outside the White House on this stunning May 1st. The sun is shining bright and the D.C. press corps is buzzing with electric energy. Moments ago, Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller were unleashing fire in the press room, breaking down President Trump's first 100 days of restoring common sense to America. I've got the exclusive clips from the White House that will fire you up. Now, let's start with transparency. Trump is proving he is the most open president ever. In this clip, hear how he has delivered on his promises, securing our borders, slashing $200 million in waste, and ending Biden's war on energy, all while standing up for free speech and our kids. Watch.
To mark President Trump's triumphant first 100 days in office, we've detailed all week how President Trump has been hard at work delivering on the promises he made to the American people. And yesterday, the president once again showcased why he is the most transparent and accessible president in American history when he held his fourth open press cabinet meeting. Every cabinet secretary went into great detail, explaining how their respective agencies are making life better for American families and businesses. And then the president allowed all of you to ask questions on anything you wanted afterwards. One of the main reasons President Trump won nearly 80 million votes, swept all 7 battleground states, and received a resounding mandate from the American public is because of the contrast he presented during the campaign and continues to this day. Everything in President Trump's agenda is grounded in one thing: common sense. While the Democrat Party went off the deep end and doubled down on pure craziness, President Trump pledged to restore common sense back to the United States of America. In a little more than 3 months, that's exactly what he's done. He recognized that America is a sovereign nation that cannot survive if it does not protect its territorial borders. So he secured the border in record time and ended the mass invasion of tens of millions of illegal aliens into our homeland. The president knows his top responsibility is ensuring the safety of the American people, which is why he's arresting violent illegal alien invaders in our communities who threaten our public safety. And it's unacceptable to President Trump to allow rampant waste, fraud, and abuse of Americans' precious tax dollars, which is why the president championed a historic DOGE effort that saved nearly $200 billion already. President Trump knows America is blessed with an abundance of liquid gold below our feet in the form of fossil fuels. So he ended Joe Biden's reckless war on American energy and is restoring American energy dominance to lower costs and strengthen our national security. President Trump believes Americans should be free to drive whatever car they want, so he ended Joe Biden's disastrous EV mandate and promoted true consumer choice. President Trump stood up for the Constitution's promise of colorblind equality before the law, so he terminated radical DEI preferencing and federal contracting and directed federal agencies to relentlessly combat private sector discrimination. DEI seeks to divide and pit Americans against each other based on immutable characteristics. President Trump put an end to it. In President Trump's America, individual dignity, hard work, and excellence are the only things that will determine if you get ahead. President Trump is a proud free speech champion, which is why he ended Joe Biden's trampling of free speech rights and the federal government's censorship of American speech on online platforms. The president believes college students have a right to speak their minds and go to school safely. Again, common sense. So he took bold action to protect Jewish American students from harassment by pro-Hamas radicals on their campuses. And President Trump knows that America's children are our future, and he'll never stop fighting for them. That's why he ended the radical, un-American indoctrination of children by eliminating support for divisive, radical gender ideology and equity ideology, and why the president protected parents' fundamental rights. And lastly, the president believes in fundamental biology. Isn't that something? Which is why he made it the official policy of the United States government that there are only two sexes, male and female. And because men and women are biologically different, President Trump ended the unfair, demeaning practice of forcing women to compete against men in sports and having their private spaces invaded. When President Trump promised a complete restoration of America and the revolution of common sense, he meant it. And over the next 100 days, get ready for historic trade deals, budget deals, and peace deals.
Next up, Trump's taking on the woke DEI disaster. Watch this clip as the White House slams race-based hiring, like air traffic controllers picked by race and not skill, and vows to enforce merit across the board from government to hospitals.
One of the most significant crises that President Trump inherited upon taking office was the wave of racial discrimination, so-called diversity, equity, and inclusion policies that have taken over both public sector and private sector entities all across the United States of America. Perhaps the most dramatic example of this is that our air traffic controllers were being hired and promoted based on race and gender, not their ability to conduct our nation's air traffic. I would estimate that probably 90% of Americans would agree with the statement that airline safety should be based on your ability to keep, airline safety jobs should be based on your ability to keep planes landing and taking off and flying safely, not on what demographic box you check. President Trump has ended across the entire federal government all hiring, recruiting, retention, promotion, and training based on race and sex. This includes in our law enforcement agencies. So again, when we took office, even in sensitive law enforcement, national security, and intelligence agencies, we were hiring individuals not on their ability to carry a weapon, not on their ability to keep Americans safe, not on their ability to conduct sensitive intelligence operations, but based upon race and sex. And obviously, that is unacceptable. It's going to be merit-based across the whole federal government. But this wasn't just the federal government. This was the private sector, and this was also, of course, our entire university and education system. So President Trump's Department of Justice, working with other departments and agencies, have made clear that this administration is going to fully enforce Title VI, Title VII, and Title IX of our Federal Civil Rights Code. Discrimination based on race and sex is prohibited by law, and this administration will vigorously enforce that. And companies, small or large, that violate plain text of federal statutes will face appropriate financial and other penalties. This administration is not going to let our society devolve into communist, woke, DEI strangulation. We are going to have a system of merit, which is not just a social and cultural issue, it's an economic issue. When you hire, retain, and recruit based on merit, as President Trump has directed, you advance innovation, you advance growth, you advance investment, you advance job creation, you create the best and safest product for all Americans. When a citizen goes to, say, a hospital in a medical emergency, they don't care what race or sex their doctor or their nurse is. They want the best treatment they can get in that emergency. When they're flying a plane or when they're on an aircraft, they want that pilot to be the best pilot, the safest pilot, not caring what that pilot's race or sex is. This applies across the whole government.
Now, here is a fiery takedown of the media. In this clip, the White House calls out the press for ignoring American victims of Biden's border policies, like Jocelyn Ungary, murdered by Venezuelan gangbangers while shilling for terrorists. Watch.
It is a sad reflection on the state of our media and many of the outlets represented in this room that you obsessively try to shill for this MS-13 terrorist, well, no coverage occurred in your papers about any of the Americans that were raped and tortured and murdered by the illegals that Biden was importing into our country. You know, you talk about due process. The Biden administration made the decision to give extensive due process to 2 trained Nicaragua terrorists that were apprehended at the border just a couple years ago. They were 2 gentlemen. They were from Venezuela. They were members of trained Nicaragua. The Biden administration Border Patrol apprehended them and made the decision to provide them with extensive due process, put them onto a program known as supervised release, and put them on ankle monitors so that they could go through a lengthy legal, judicial determination as to whether these legal aliens who had just set foot on U.S. soil might want to live in the United States for the rest of their lives. What was the result of that decision? What was the result of that choice that was made? Those 2 men kidnapped a young girl named Jocelyn Ungary from her family. They beat her, they sexually assaulted her, they tortured her, they stripped her, they murdered her, and they dumped her body. That is what the Biden administration's policy was. Most of your papers never covered her story when it happened. To the extent that you covered it at all, it was because President Trump forced you to cover it by highlighting it repeatedly over and over again. He had to shame you into covering it. And each and every one of you that sides over and over again with these MS-13 terrorists, to the extent that you have the financial means to do so, you all choose to live in condos or homes or houses as far away from these kinds of gangbangers as you possibly can. If I offered any one of you a rent-free home with no taxes to pay in any of these gang neighborhoods, and I said your neighbors are MS-13 terrorists or Mexican mafia or Sinaloa cartel or trained Nicaragua, I couldn't pay you to live there. But yet you, with your coverage, are trying to force innocent Americans to have these people as their neighbors, and that one day their daughter may be abducted from their home and raped and murdered. So you're not going to get an ounce of sympathy from this administration or President Trump for the terrorists who've invaded our homes and our country.
Trump's also fighting for our kids against radical gender ideology. This clip reveals how he's banning men from women's sports, stopping schools from changing kids' genders behind parents' backs, and ending taxpayer-funded mutilations, calling it what it is, child abuse.
This administration ended the Biden administration's policy and the Democrat Party's policy of allowing men into women's sports, men into women's spaces. We are using every single legal and financial tool we have at President Trump's direction to make it clear that schools and universities are and will lose federal funds, as you've seen in Maine, if you allow men to invade women's sports and women's spaces. And this applies to our whole K-12 system. The Department of Justice is also coordinating with state and local law enforcement to fight child abuse in our school systems. It is child abuse to change a child's gender, particularly if you do not inform the parents. In other words, if a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old goes to school, or a 7-year-old goes to school, and the teacher tries to turn the boy into a girl or the girl into a boy, that is child abuse. And this administration is treating that as child abuse. And it is a gross violation of parental rights. This also includes the administration's message to our hospital systems that they cannot and will not be allowed to use taxpayer dollars to perform chemical castrations and sexual mutilations of children. Castration surgeries, castration drugs, sterilization treatments of children are barbaric. They violate all sound medical ethics. They are completely unwarranted. They harm children for life irreversibly. It is child torture. It is child abuse. It is medical malpractice. And so the Department of Health and Human Services, under the leadership of Bobby Kennedy, as well as the Department of Justice and other departments of this government, are making clear to our medical providers and our hospital systems that you cannot use taxpayer dollars to perform these barbaric procedures on America's children. And HHS has systematically updated eliminated all of the junk, fake science that was produced under the Biden administration promoting sex changes on children, promoting the idea of sterilizing children. That's been cleaned out, that's been removed, and new guidance is being issued to doctors and hospitals advising them that they cannot perform these horrifying procedures, these irreversible procedures on our nation's children.
Now, on to China. Trump's not letting them steal our future. Watch this clip as the White House details his plan to stop China's intellectual property theft, currency manipulation, and trade deficits, securing our economy and national security.
So China is a unique situation. Obviously, the president has talked at length about what happened to us economically since China's entrance into the World Trade Organization and the trillions and trillions of dollars of trade deficits that we've racked up with China over the period of that time, and what that's meant for our national security, what that's meant for our economic security, what that's meant for our supply chains. Obviously, right now, the Secretary of the Treasury is in the process of developing a plan that will answer the questions that you're talking about, but the president's goals have been very clear on these points, which is that he is not going to allow China to continue to steal our intellectual property, to continue to illegally dump and subsidize their goods in our markets, to manipulate their currency, to rack up an unsustainable trade deficit. We need to have a trade relationship with China that does not do harm to our nation's economic and national security. And that has to be the guidepost of any objective. At the same time, tariffs will bring significant revenue into this country that will allow us to pursue our dramatic plan of tax cuts and reforms.
Trump is also cracking down on universities defying the law. In this clip, hear how he's investigating schools like Harvard for illegal racial quotas, ensuring admissions are colorblind and merit-based, just as the Supreme Court demands. Watch.
This administration has opened investigations into universities across the country for violating. We talk a lot about Supreme Court rulings. Universities across this country are in plain and direct violation of the Supreme Court's ruling that affirmative action, as in racial quotas and set-asides, are illegal. Students must be admitted to universities on a color-blind basis. But we have demonstrated through clear evidence that our university system, including our medical schools, and perhaps particularly our medical schools, are engaging in race-based discrimination, racial set-asides, racial quota schemes, and other efforts to evade the Supreme Court's ruling, and again, the plain text of federal statute. So universities are on notice, and universities are already facing the financial consequences of their noncompliance with federal law. The clearest example that we're all familiar with, of course, being Harvard, which is engaged in repeat, systemic, and sustained violations of federal civil rights law.
Now, the fight against woke culture continues. This clip shows Trump banning critical race theory from schools, ensuring our kids are taught to love America, not hate it, while shutting down communist ideology in education. Check this out.
This administration is also fighting to get critical race theory out of our school districts. Children will be taught to love America. Children will be taught to be patriots. Children will be taught civic values for schools that want federal taxpayer funding. So as we close the Department of Education and we provide funding to states, we are going to make sure that these funds are not being used to promote communist ideology. For any nation to be successful, it cannot teach its children to hate themselves and to hate their country. So these are a few of the areas in which President Trump has fought the cancerous communist woke culture that was destroying this country, where we were led to believe that men were women, that women were men, that racial discrimination was good, that merit was bad, and that safety and physical security mattered less than the feelings of liberal ideologues.
Finally, Trump, the dealmaker, shines. Watch this clip on his historic U.S.-Ukraine Reconstruction Fund, a first-of-its-kind deal to rebuild Ukraine while benefiting America, and showing his commitment to lasting peace.
Last night, we saw yet again why President Trump is our deal-maker-in-chief. We secured a historic agreement to establish the United States-Ukraine Reconstruction Investment Fund. This is a first-of-its-kind economic partnership for the reconstruction and long-term economic success of Ukraine that the United States will greatly benefit from. This partnership represents the United States taking an economic stake in securing a free, peaceful, and sovereign future for Ukraine. This partnership establishes a fund that will receive 50% of royalties, license fees, and other similar payments from natural resource projects in Ukraine. President Trump has been clear from the beginning. He wants the killing in this brutal war to end. This agreement shows how invested the president is in securing a truly lasting peace.
That's Donald Trump's common sense revolution in action, patriots. From securing our borders to fighting for our kids and making deals for peace, he's making America great again. So stay tuned for more from a buzzing D.C. This is Gary Franchi signing off. The first 100 days of Trump's return reveals something the elites find terrifying: common sense works. By slashing DEI bureaucracy, enforcing immigration law, embracing American energy, and returning to merit-based systems, Trump is systematically undoing the ideological damage of the past 4 years. This isn't complicated policy. It's simply removing the artificial barriers that prevented America from thriving. And that's precisely why the establishment fights so desperately against it. Because when America succeeds under these principles, their entire narrative collapses. So here's the question you should be asking. Why does restoring common sense in government trigger such hysterical opposition from the media and folks like Ilhan Omar, who just get asked a very simple question on the street? And what are they so afraid that you'll discover? Huh? Maybe another Doge roundtable, right? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're supporting the truth, make sure you check out the Next News merch shop, shop.nextnewsnetwork.com. It's linked down below.